lost in the tides of change. The sound of poetic motion as the wind whistles past and the smoke plays follow the leader on a still, quiet morning as a legend of steam passes by. What makes people want to congregate beside a railway track, stand on footbridges with their cameras, stop their cars on the side of a road just to admire a passing steam train? I can't really answer that question. There's just something mystique about seeing these legends of our past once more gracing the present. They bring a sense of excitement to all onlookers, young and old. The same excitement of yesteryears when travelling on a train had a unique feeling as the smoke used to float past the windows as you were admiring the passing scenery. One such engine that used to fly the flag of our state's railway was 3801. Built in 1943 at Clyde Engineering, Granville, she was a new era of locomotive incorporating the revolutionary streamlined panels with the very familiar bullet nose. Her claim to fame was the hauling of the Newcastle Flyer on the 28th of June 1964 when she journeyed to Newcastle from Sydney in 2 hours 1.5 minutes and made a return journey in 2 hours 2.5 minutes, a record to this day which has never been challenged. Gratefully, she was saved from the hands of the scrap metal merchant when the curtains finally closed to end the era of steam to make way for diesel locomotion, and was taken to her home of rest after 26 faithful years' service. Until recent times, her steaming days were thought to be over when it was announced that she was to undergo a major restoration program by out-of-work apprentices at the Newcastle State Dockyard. 2.5 years and $500,000 later, she was resurrected to become a credit to her restorers. After her inauguration of Back to the Rails, she arrived at Cardiff workshops for an inspection of the tender and balancing of the weights which rest on each of the wheels. Dressed in her best attire, which hadn't been seen since she left Cardiff before retirement, she stood symbolic of the achievements of the locomotion of the steam years. The workshop staff came out in droves to admire this marvel of man-made machinery as she was welcomed with a warm reception by the men who had spent sweat and back-breaking long hours overhauling her for the service of the state. Bright and happy faces were the call of the day to once more have the opportunity to stand next to her while reminiscing of past experiences when Cardiff Workshops was filled with these giants. It's not right to send her back into service inferior, so minor repairs were in order. With the tender in the workshops, 3801 stood over the pit for repacking of the tilted suspension springs. It was a case of lifting and placing steel cotters above the springs, then lower the locomotive and retest till the locomotive was balanced. With the necessary repairs completed, the tender was transported out from the workshops to again join its correlative partner to bond the relationship once more. They were coupled together with the precision of a surgeon by a team of tradesmen as the workshop employees gave their support by their presence. The atmosphere of this event was of immense excitement, as though at a launching of a passenger liner. To see this engineering marvel led across the weighbridge, to have her innermost statistics read yet again before being shown to the area where she will be fired early next morning. Past 2 in the morning of Wednesday, 19th of November 1986. The weather bleak and cold. Not quite expected of an Australian summer's night, The clouds are as black as if the heavens are about to burst open, with uninvited showers of rain to add more frustration to the 3 weather watchers on this occasion. The night of gloom becomes rapidly a night of bliss as the full moon appears through the dark, eerie clouds for just a short moment to glisten on the 5-day-old green paintwork of the 3801, to be fired up yet another time from one of her past memorable homes. Once more from the Cardiff workshops, being fired up on the grounds she knew so well, where she had spent many a day being overhauled, then rebuilt and dressed up to her original glory to fly the flag of the New South Wales Government Railways as the Queen of the steam era. She was a majestic sight on that cold and windy November night, watching the smoke rise from the roof of the streamlined panels and the glow of burning coals from the firebox. Even if one didn't appreciate the finer points of the steam locomotive, this awe-inspiring sight would be locked in their memories for a long time to come in just gazing at this titanic marvel as mechanical life is once more breathed into her from the 3 dedicated loyalists. Max Bridges, Mark Rowland and Gary Saunder had been here since 1:45 to begin the firing up preparations, with an old world sense of excitement written all over their faces. All members of railway museums in some form or another, tonight was to become a dream come true, in the sense how many other railway enthusiasts in New South Wales would ever have the opportunity to raise the steam on such a historical locomotive as this Pacific Class 3801. Nothing was left to chance. Everything had to be done by the book, right down to the use of a kerosene flare lamp to show the way to the location of the lubrication points. It wasn't hard to close my mind to the outside world of the 80s and imagine I was back in the 1950s, where steam ruled the rails. When this same locomotive had just finished its major overhaul at the workshops and was being fired to go trial before being placed back in service. The imagination can run wild thinking of the unforgettable past. It felt like a solemn occasion amongst the shed crew. Very few words were spoken, and only the occasional smile would break the serious looks on their faces. And, as if at predetermined lengthy intervals, was the sound of laughter heard above the rustling of the trees in the wind. The flames were starting to gush from the firebox, and in order to create more heat, logs of hardwood timber were thrown in, then more coal, till the flames began to race out in a whirlpool of fury, insisting the Queen would be up to 215 pounds per square inch by 7:30 a.m, in time for the departure en route to Chullora. The cab by now was filled with a heavy deposit of smoke, which made one's breathing quite difficult. But who cares? This wasn't any ordinary night, and I wasn't aboard any ordinary locomotive. This slight inconvenience of breathing literally brought tears to our eyes, and it still didn't matter because I regarded this night as a present nostalgia. It doesn't happen every day that I have the chance to stand and later in the day ride such a historical achievement of locomotive power. It's been said by an anonymous enthusiast, a steam engine has always got character. It's the most human of all man-made machines. There must be some truth to this statement. Any driver would have told you that each individual locomotive always had a mind of its own, and tonight was no exception. Maybe it was because of the weather. She just didn't want to heat up. There was plenty of smoke, and the flames were still leaping from the firebox, but the boiler was still stone cold. So shovel more coal. I counted 7 sprinkles of rain and the wind building up even more. I was waiting for the clouds to break, fortunately to no avail. There was still plenty of work to do before the morning, like oiling the Santa Fe big ends, check the oil levels in the drive bearings, lubricate all the drive bushes. It seemed everywhere you looked there's more of these lubricating parts. It's certainly a job of dedication looking after these engines of steam. Maybe more than dedication. It could be described as working for the love of this giant of steam. Well, you'd have to have love for this locomotive to be here this time of the morning. Give the Nathan lubricators the once-over, making sure they're pumping oil to the slide bar to allow the crosshead to move freely. It's a very rewarding sight watching the enthusiastic preparation and dedication of these three men in preparing such an awe-inspiring sight as 3801. The last time I remembered her in a position similar to this, she was at the Broadmeadow goods yards about 21 years ago. Then her green paintwork was camouflaged by a black sooty smoke dust from her many years of hauling the likes of the Flyer, other passenger and the countless number of goods trains. Things have changed quite a bit since those days. Now that the 3-year overhaul at the State Dockyard has been completed, she's back to being the pride of the fleet. For some people, it was heaven sent that these steam locomotives were replaced by diesel power, but for most of us, it was a great shame to lose such a magnificent sight off our rails. There's nothing more refreshing after so many years of diesel being dispersed into the atmosphere than to smell and breathe the long-lost aroma of steam. Well, some of us think it's an all-right smell. I wouldn't like to imagine the number of man-hours the apprentices spent to bring this locomotive back to its glory. It's a credit to them for such an outstanding effort to strip such an engine back to bare minimum and rebuild it with very little information on hand. But they did it. Well, tonight's efforts aren't in vain. The old girl is starting to show signs of coming up to steam. The firebox is glowing a rich reddy colour, though the gauges still haven't registered yet. I have every bit of faith in her. She would be ready by the required departure time. The wind has died down to just a breeze by now, and the smoke from the prize 38 class guides the direction to which way the wind is blowing. By now, most of the inspections by Gary have been completed, and a well-earned break is a welcome change after working for 4 hours non-stop. It's quite funny, really, watching Gary, Mark and Max with gleam written all over their faces as their eyes are fixed firmly on the green, streamlining and superior design of 3801. It's like a mystical aura in the atmosphere surrounding this locomotive as she stands in the early morning hours as a symbol to the achievement of the State Rail to have her rebuilt as a flagship to the New South Wales Railways. Everything about her is of considerable size when compared to our latest fleet of locomotives, like the 5-foot 9-inch main driving wheels, the 21.5-inch diameter bore of the driving pistons, the 76-foot 4 5/8-inch total overall length. Even her height makes some of the new classes of locomotives feel somewhat dwarfed. At 20 past 5, the first glimmer of morning light became visible, silhouetting the 38 class amidst the dark swirl of storm clouds. Smoke billowing from her chimney, heralding the new dawn, and the first sign of steam pressure manifesting our disbelief it would be ready by 7:30 a.m. She is really a sight for sore eyes, the way she stands there in preparation for the morning run to Sydney. It would have been reminiscent of bygone days in preparing for a trial to leave from Cardiff as she was fired and standing, waiting for the crew to join her for the morning run. One person who has followed the progress of 3801 from when it finished official service to its major overhaul at the State Dockyard recently is Ron Preston, the manager of Cardiff Workshops.
3801 was always the favourite engine of the system. You know, the combination of streamlining, green paint, high speed, always made an attraction wherever it went. And so it was a logical choice to overhaul it and take it to Perth in 1970. And Cardiff was the place where it received that last overhaul. Unfortunately, in the early 70s, a different administration decided that steam was not required, and so 3801 was laid to rest in the museum at Thirlmere. However, a more enlightened regime decided that it could run again, and so the State Dockyard was the place where it received its overhaul. It was put back together, but there were certain things that only Cardiff could do, and so it came here. We've been able to adjust the weights. There's a few other things we've tidied up, and so here it is, ready to run again for its first big run back to Sydney.
It truly is a tremendous sight watching the steam building up as the drivers arrive to take over from Gary, who has worked half the night in preparing the locomotive for this trial run. Today, the Queen of Steam will journey to the Chullora Workshops, which will make it the longest run since its rebuilding. She will be led in command by Fred Thompson, the mechanical inspector, driven by Stuart Ebe, and fired by Ron Jubb, all three of which have had extensive experience in the operations of steam locomotives. Stuart Ebe said to me earlier he felt more comfortable driving these steam engines than he would driving electric locomotives. He said with steam they're a challenge. Challenge may be. A lot of people would jump at the opportunity to sit behind the regulator of one of these giants just to be able to feel the wind rushing through their hair and the wind whistling past as the steam makes its unique sound as it journeys the countryside. By now, the Queen was in full steam, the gauges registering 215 pounds per square inch pressure. Originally, the boiler pressure was 245 pounds per square inch, but it was necessary to reduce the pressure due to the new design of the firebox. What a grand sight, watching her stand there as a monument to the steam era. She had that look about her, as if she wanted to show off to the bystanders that she was still the #1 locomotive by her graceful movements. By now, it was 7 a.m. and the preparation was right on schedule. Up to a full head of steam, lubrication checks completed, tender filled with water and coal. The only items left on the checklist is to open the cylinder cocks and inspect the brakes. Just as if a godsend, the sun momentarily appeared through the clouds just as Stuart Ebe opened the cylinder cocks to release the steam to blow out the excess water and steam from the main cylinders. The locomotive disappeared into a blanket of steam, so with a combination of the sun, created a halo around the majestic 3801 as she reappeared through the centre of the steam. The parade of onlookers stood nearby in amazement as mechanical life shone from her glistening steel body through the clouds of steam, as the streamlined nose of the 38 class protrudes into the morning to herald her approaching departure. With all inspections completed, Ron Jubb shovels more coal into the firebox. With one long blast on the whistle, Stuart winds the reverser handle, releases the brakes, and pulls the regulator open to steam down the track tender first. spectacular, the only way to describe the movement of those enormous drive wheels as they turned to denote a sign of power as she steamed past the traverser and disappeared yet once more into a cloud of steam. Completely out of sight, even the workshop's main office disappeared into the haze of obscured white as 3801 powered down the track to couple with the dynamometer testing carriage. As she journeyed, the onlookers watched in complete excitement, while others brought out their cameras for a lasting memory of a locomotive saved from extinction by the then Chief Executive of the State Rail, David Hill. Nostalgia in the making at Cardiff Workshops as she moves past the bowling green siding in reverse under a full head of steam at a crawling pace and then creeps to a halt. The points are changed, the reverser is turned to the forward position, brakes released, and the regulator opens slightly, and again she moves into the siding where the dynamometer car is to be coupled. It became a very rewarding day after a night of bleak weather to see the sun shining over this monumental morning as the white mist rose into the firmament, as the Queen of Steam paraded past workshop employees in gratitude for the hospitality shown to her in years gone by and in the recent days. Through the main gate, past the old signal box which used to give her the right of way when pulling the express trains of yesteryear, down the loop to sit and wait for the green signal before letting loose on the main line. It was intended to journey to Broadmeadow to pick up a freight consignment before departing for Chullora, but after sitting in the siding for 20 minutes, one of the signal box attendants informed Stuart Ede the original plans were cancelled and that we would leave from Sulphide Junction, the siding we were now sitting in. Our new consignment of freight was sitting adjacent in the up siding, so when we're granted a green signal, open the throttle, steam over to the other siding and couple up to the 3 open wagons in a guard's van. Our departure time now is 9:45 a.m, so we play the waiting game of our sojourn. The workshop fence is crowded with railway spectators, waiting with grueling patience for the sound of that long-awaited shriek of the whistle, announcing the departure of the prize visitor. The long-awaited sound finally pierced the atmosphere when 3801's whistle was blown. The spectators viewed the scene with excitement as those 6 huge drive wheels began to turn as the 38 class initiated her grand departure en route to Chullora. Slowly she began to build up speed, and once out of the siding, it was open the throttle right out to prove that steam still ruled the rails. It wasn't long before the Cardiff Workshops disappeared from sight as she journeyed towards Cockle Creek. There was a lot of fond memories back there, and besides, it would only be a matter of days before she would grace the grounds of that depot once more. It was an ecstatic sight seeing people occupying various vantage points, mesmerised by this steam engine powering through the countryside. People peering over their back fences. Cars stopped on the side of the road, from pedestrian bridges. Even a class of school children had abandoned a lesson just to see this spectacle of a lost era. Fassifern Station is just in front of us and is where we'll disembark to allow 3801 to continue her journey with only her locomotive crew and the engineers travelling in the dynamometer carriage. To travel under the power of a steam train is something that shouldn't be missed by anyone. The State Rail deserve praise for making it possible for future generations to experience this form of travel from an age many of us wish hadn't disappeared. The trial of 3801 was an exceptional success. The driver, Stuart Eve, said she performed to the highest of expectations, especially when climbing the Cowan Bank. Fred Thompson was very happy with its success, and the fireman Ron Judd didn't stop shoveling coal. There were problems, though. When she arrived back at Cardiff Workshops on 21st of November, it was found one of the Nathan lubricators failed, and therefore no oil was distributed to the slide bar. Because of this lack of lubrication, the white metal coating on the cross slide either disintegrated or splattered over the main piston. Some copper pipes have to be replaced because of the unsatisfactory form of mounting. What man-made machine of this size doesn't have its teething problems? It was expected to have some. She has to be ready and back in steam by Saturday, 29th of November, which is only a week away. On the Saturday night, she will be presented at a ball in her honour at Sydney's Central Railway Station. This ball will be the grand unveiling of 3801 to be introduced back into service for its controlling company 3801 Limited as a tourist attraction in which she will run special excursions for the public. When not in use, she will be housed at Thirlmere in the Rail Transport Museum amongst her own kind and kindred breeds. Maitland, hub of the Hunter Valley. rich in historical charm of the yesteryears. A township full of buildings of the Edwardian period of architecture, reflecting a town of prosperity of days gone by. Maitland hosts many annual attractions for the tourist, but no other event equals or comes even close to that of the Hunter Valley Steamfest. This year is the second year in succession this festival has taken place, and because of its popularity, will be a reserved event on the calendar for some years to come. People from all over the country, as well as the people of the Hunter Valley, came to witness the coming together of the steam engines of the lost era of the railways. The locomotives taking part in this year's lineup are 5910, 3642, and the most publicised locomotive of the remaining steam era, 3801. This locomotive has had much publicity over the recent years since it was decided to restore it at the Newcastle State Dockyard so it can again run as a reminder of our steaming past. Heading off to Maitland for the grand opening of 1987 Steamfest was 5910, carrying its passenger assignment from both Sydney and Newcastle, as onlookers waited at various vantage points on the side of the track, together with their cameras, to once more keep a record of the past. Followed closely by the double header of 3801, leading 3642. Saturday, April 11, Maitland is crowded with patiently waiting onlookers wanting to glimpse yet again the prize engines. The sound of a whistle in the distance heralds the incoming trains as the late arrivals of spectators clamber for the limited vantage points left. 5910 steams into the station with its passengers. It was everybody off, so the 59 class could shunt its train into a nearby siding to make way for the double header, carrying the officials and dignitaries as well as its passengers. It was a real carnival atmosphere as the brass band started playing as the two green locomotives paraded into Maitland Station, little kiddies holding tightly to their dad's hand while standing on the steps of the overpass. The crowd was chatting amongst themselves while the locomotives crawled to a halt. This year, the Deputy Premier, Mr. Ron Nealock, will perform the honorary duty of opening Steamfest 87. Once the official duties were ended, the public rode the trains to Patterson. Steam trains have always held a fascination for people of all ages. Just the distant sound of a steam train's whistle is enough to excite the curious to head for the nearest railway line to see for oneself nostalgia passing. Yet, with the changing of times and the implementation of diesel, electric power, the magic of on the rails has somewhat diminished. Still, for the next 2 days, both the young and with the memorabilia of the not-so-young can share in the excitement of these trains of bygone years, to once more experience the clicking of the wheels over the points and the swaying motion of the carriages to the sound of puffing echoing from the engines as the smoke floats past the countryside. No other event of this calibre would cause people to flock with video, movie and still cameras as well as cassette tape recorders to prominent positions on the sides of the track. In fact, just about on every curve or bridge, onlookers would stand waiting for these spectacles of steam to pass. So on nearing in just about perfect precision, the patient enthusiasts would press the shutters of their cameras to record yet another steam engine passing by.
There's just something about steam with the men in those days. They were a very close-knitted mob. Not like today, like, you know, you were a very close-knitted mob. And you were proud, or I was. But today you'll get off one side of a locomotive and the other blokes will climb up the other side. There's just not that unity there anymore, which is a shame. But I loved the Steamfest. It was just fantastic weekend, like, you know, the first and the last. We were a bit hectic there at one stage. Like blokes go crook about doing 4 Talaras or something on a rail motor. I think there on that one, that last Sunday, I think we done 5 Talaras on a steam engine, like, you know, on 5910, and blokes were going crook about that. We never stopped all day, but it was good. Biggest problem and the biggest thing today is their water. Like, that's the thing that beats you. It's so slow, and they just don't seem to give you that time to do these things at times, like, you know. And another thing is lack of communication. They just don't realise. And of course you can't hustle 6 or 1,000 odd people that are just dying to get on a train and say, right, you're away in a couple of minutes. You just can't do it. And so you gradually fall behind, and it's a shame, really. It really is. But that's the biggest thing. Water takes up so much of your time. I know years ago, it's funny when they used to run around, they'd come out and go cooking, shake their fist at you for priming on them. Today, you prime on them, they rub it, oh, it's beautiful, it's lovely, like, you know. Back in those days, we got fined if you got primed, if you primed a locomotive on somebody's washing or car or anything like that. So you just got to be very careful when it's that. You can always tell when it's about the prime. They'll send up a little telltale puff of white, like vapour, like, you know, and she'll just go up in a big cloud and she'll just, you think, hello, ease off or do something because it's about to go. So, but you can't help it with the 38. You can by blowing the elements out. That's what you do, that when you stand there, and you do that like in the header itself, in the superheated header part. You get all this water and the condensation, all that, and then it builds up. So that's when you've got to blow it out. Garrett's were very bad for it because they had so much piping, like, you know, from your rear cylinders to the front ones, and they had so much condensation water to get out. And you could blow them out and go for ages, and once you close this on the cocks, they'd still probably throw a bit.
The main event on Sunday is the historical confrontation between 3801 and a Tiger Moth, a race which some folks have wanted to see for a long time. A race of the fittest, whereby the 38 class has to haul a consignment of carriages, complete with passengers, while the Tiger Moth has to perform a set number of manoeuvres. The race is from Waratah to Maitland at full throttle for both competitors, except at Hexham, where the 38 was given a caution because of track work in the vicinity.
But Hexham, you see, they got that 60-kilometre speed there on all them diamond crossovers, very rough. Well, then that took a lot out of it, like, you know, if I didn't have that speed there, God, I'd have been flying across there. But we were restricted to 100 kilometres an hour. But we were doing more than that. It was coming down off, we got that coming down off Hanbury and down off Thornton Bank. That's when the fire started to dance away at the end of the door when you're coming down Thornton. It's not that you're pulling, but it's just fire breaks. That's what when the fireman goes in, you just got to keep
Some say it was a foregone conclusion that the 38 won. But even so, the Tiger Moth put up a very challenging fight and lost by only a narrow margin. Stuart Ibe came out the outright winner of the race. He pushed the bullet-nosed 38.01 to its limit, even with its unfair handicap trailing behind the tender, to drive the 38 into the winning circle of the 1987 Steamfest. And as a winner of Just Desserts, both Stuart and Ron, the fireman on the day, were presented with the wreath of honour to commemorate their efforts in winning this historic race. A race isn't a race without a competitor, and none more worthy than Tom, the pilot of the Tiger Moth, with congratulations in order for putting up such an outstanding challenge.
Oh, I had that many people come up getting our autographs, Ron and myself's autograph, and they have these special, they had a special, the program, you know, the program, and they just want you to sign across it and everything else. Well, you just couldn't do everything, like, you know, offending some and others, oh, come on, like, you know, but you just couldn't do them all. We just had to get going, and, then when at the presentation, they were wanting photographs and wanting everything else, but you know, you've got to go and turn them. You've got to get in and dip the water, take water, and do the fire and get things ready. And the funny part about it was that my boy, he come up there. He's 6'5", and he's like a greyhound dog in training. And he just climbed up with his singlet and shorts on, like, you know, and of course this camera crew, Mike Willis' camera crew, was sitting there, and this camera bloke's glaring down at him, you know, and my young fella looked at him and he said, "Don't look at me like that, that's my dad." Oh, you better come on up then, like, you know. It was real funny, like, you know, here he is with no shoes and that on, and well, we just had to hop off because it's too dangerous with our shoes, and like, you know. Only got to get his foot under the flap between the engine and tender, and you're gone. So, but I had a bit of a yarn there to him, and away he went. But right, the look at the look on this bloke's face, this camera bloke from Mike Willis here, it was unreal. I don't know, they used to probably think I was mad. I used to love, I'd fire all the way from Muswellbrook to Ard Glen. Just to drive it from Ard Glen down to Willow Tree. That's just to get the experience of taking the train down the hill. Then I'd fire all the way from Werris Creek to Ard Glen coming home, and then drive from Ard Glen down to Murrurundi to get the experience. Well, if you've got a good young driver, they'd probably say, oh, well, all right, you can take it from Ard Glen to Whingin. And I'd drive from there, and then I'd take over firing again from that. I prefer firing. I think, well, there's an art in both of it, really. When you used to get these old drivers that, like Gordon Campbell and Vince Caulfield and them boys from up in Muswellbrook, naming a few, they were very, very keen enginemen, and they really were. They'd sit there, and I've seen this Gordon Campbell, like on the TF, you'd have they got like a square slot where a pawl went into, like, you know, to save you, and they'd be about probably 2 inches apart, and I've seen that man hold that reverser midway between those two pawls to get that correct beat, that, you know, the real nice beat of that locomotive, and you learn all this, but steaming was firing, I should say, was an art. There was an art in it, and there's no two ways about it. Every locomotive wasn't the same. You could probably have 154, 53, 55 class. Well, 55 was a K class, but the 53 and the 54, what they call the TF, you could have 100 of those, and every one would have a different characteristic, and you just have to find them out as you go along. Same with all your other locomotives. They were all the same. Some would take like a bank, some would take a big bank, some would only take a little one. It was just that. You learnt that over the years, and that's why I say you just cannot teach somebody how to fire a locomotive that's never ever been brought up. Just within a month, you just can't do it. Even today now, I've been 33 years, every train is different, and you can, even the train have got all the different characteristics. One will run over the hill this day, you get another train and it won't. Ones will brake better than the other ones and all that, and it just takes years of experience, and I've heard of drivers who have been driving for 43 years will still get off and say, gee, I made a little mistake yesterday. And so there you go, like, you know, and they think they can bring them off the street and make drivers out of them in 5 years. Well, I can't see it. I really don't.
Possibly one of the most admired throughout the world of man-made machines is the steam engine, whether as a stationary display in a museum or as a moving monument on rails. The putting together of minds of James Watt, the father of the steam engine, and George Stephenson, founder of the first successful locomotive, allows us in the day and age to come together and pay tribute to their achievements and contribution to society. To see steam in a cloud hissing from the cylinders or being released from the numerous valves, the main drive rods pushing the wheels to the puffing sound while powering down the track. To once more glance at a glowing firebox with its burning red coals as the fireman feeds another shovel of coal to its wanting appetite. People came from all walks of life, mostly with cameras hanging around their necks, with excited children by their sides. Some steam enthusiasts, while others just curious to see a steam engine again or even for the first time. Wherever they were from or what reason, everyone had a good time, not only seeing the trains and riding on them, but also with the abundance of novelty stalls along the roadway selling their wares to the casual shopper, and others providing entertainment to the tired and weary needing a rest.
Sit down! I've got the belt in the car and I'll use it.
It's a fact of life that man and his creations change with the course of time. The machines that once were efficient to run now become redundant by a new technological idea that is more efficient and will save on maintenance and running costs. And so the saga of man's achievements continues. No matter how much change in this upmarket world, there is always a fascination aroused in all of us to the engineering marvels of yesteryears. They are a proud engine, these old steam mammoths of engineering, as they stand at the ends of the platform, waiting their departure en route for Paterson. A real crowd pleaser, as the vast number of people congregate around, trying to lock into their memories a lasting picture of the days when this once was a familiar sight throughout the state. Gazing up at the chimney as the smoke billows into the atmosphere, spreading a smell of age lost burning coals into the vicinity, sparking up even more memories of the golden era of steam. Everywhere the eye can see, budding photographers clicking away at their cameras, pacing about at all angles trying to capture yet another photo for their albums. Some wanting a shot of a lone locomotive without a spectator in sight, while others mustered together for that family or friend portrait against a backdrop of a steam train. Either way, it was a photographer's paradise or nightmare, depending who was standing behind the camera. After 2 days of what organisers claim to be an exceptionally huge success, the sounds of steam engines and the bustling of the crowds will remain silent till 1988, our bicentennial year, when again these prize machines will grace our presence in Newcastle, Maitland and Patterson for the year that's expected to be the biggest and best ever Hunter Valley Steamfest.
But I hope to be back there next year. I just hope that it is just as enjoyable and the people enjoy it and get as much kick out of it as what we do, putting it on for them. And that's the part that I like to see, is the people who enjoy it, who love the steam the same as anybody else, and that's what I enjoy most. Letting somebody sit up there with a little kiddie and taking a photograph of him and as proud as punch, like, you know, and him sitting there waiting with their eyes. The expression of the kiddie's eyes and things are the part that I love to see at times. They sit there and you might just reach up while he's not looking and blow the whistle, and he'll leap about a foot out of the seat, like, you know, but their eyes are rolling around. I don't think they're going to move their head. They think if they move their head, something's going to happen. But yeah, their eyes are rolling around everywhere, and the gleam in their eye. And if they could just put a shovel full of coal in the firebox, and it just makes their day. And that's the part that I enjoy. Somebody that comes there and with their kiddies or their wife or anybody, it doesn't matter who it is, and to just see the expressions and the appreciation of just you letting them put one shovel full of coal in.